Johnson comes in and makes changes to the Bears coaching staff immediately. We're going to talk a little bit about what those changes are and why Dennis Allen would actually make a really good defensive coordinator under Ben Johnson. We're going to talk about all that plus more right after this.
You are now tuned in to Chicago Bears Central, your number one place for all Chicago Bears news and content.
What's going on, Bears fans? Welcome to another episode of Chicago Bears Central, your number one spot for everything Chicago Bears related. I'm the host there, Hayes, but more importantly, you guys can follow the channel at Chi Bears Central on every social media platform we happen to be on. With that said, let's go ahead and get into the content for today. And so Ben Johnson makes immediate changes to the Bears coaching staff. Thomas Brown, the interim head coach, plus offensive coordinator, plus passing game coordinator, whatever he was, he's gone. Chris Beatty, also the wide receivers coach, he's out of there. Chris Morgan, the offensive line coach, he's gone. He's up out of there. He better have been. And QB coach Kerry Joseph and defensive coordinator as well, Eric Washington, will all not be retained by the Chicago Bears. This all does make some sense. Now, the special teams coordinator will stay on with the Chicago Bears. But other than that, Ben Johnson's basically coming in and cleaning house, which was completely expected, right? I don't think that should really surprise anybody that Ben Johnson's going to want his own people in the building when it all comes down to it. And so it is what it is. Like Simo, he had to get up out of there. The offensive line coach, there's no really point of bringing him back in any point in time, at least in my opinion. And now Ben Johnson gets to really go out and see what's going to happen or go out and build his own staff. I know there initially been some talk about Hank Fraley maybe being the offensive coordinator. We now know that's not going to happen. He's actually interviewing with the Seahawks for their offensive coordinator position as well. And he could also end up staying on with the Detroit Lions as their offensive coordinator. But with that said, Richard Hightower is returning as the special teams coordinator. I'm not too mad at that and him moving on with that when it comes down to it. Like, the special teams wasn't really the problem with the Chicago Bears at all, at least not in my opinion. So it really makes some sense in being able to keep that. But you want new, fresh eyes. You want guys with everything coming in to this, and the Bears will really figure out their path going forward. Now, one of the guys that's still rumored for the Chicago Bears to bring in here for defensive coordinator is Dennis Allen. And many people, like C-Dub, one of the co-hosts here, had some questions about, hey, what would make Dennis Allen a good defensive coordinator here? And I want to talk a little bit about that, right? Now, we don't know for sure if Dennis Allen, just like Hank Fraley was rumored to be the Bears' next offensive coordinator, that ended up not happening. Dennis Allen, will see if he does end up getting an interview or something like that. The Bears have actually put in an interview, which we'll talk about here in a second as well. But Dennis Allen, when you look at how he really revamped that New Orleans Saints offense, he came in there. They're one of the worst defenses in the league before he came in there. You look at between 2017 and 2023, how he really revamped that Chicago Bears. Not Chicago. I hope it's going to be the Chicago Bears, but revamp the New Orleans Saints defense. I mean, you can't knock that, right? They were no lower than 14th in points allowed from 2017 to 2023. Yeah, we want to be better than that, right? Like, but Dennis Allen, that the head coaching experience that he also brings, Ben Johnson has already talked about how important it is to surround himself with some veterans that understand, that have done the job before. That's what he wants on his coaching staff. And I also think when you look at Dennis Allen, like the fact that he's failed as a head coach, but you look at how he was and how he supported Sean Payton over that time as one of his lead guys, he can very well lean on Ben Johnson. Ben Johnson can lean on him to have a similar role here in Chicago. So Dennis Allen is somebody that I'm not mad at if the Bears do take a look at. And Ben Johnson wants to bring in here. I think that it makes a lot of sense for everything that Ben Johnson has already talked about that he wants in regards to his coordinators and things like that. And we'll end up seeing if that ends up being the case. There's going to be a lot of kind of talk around things, and we don't know if that all that talk is going to have some if there's going to be smoke where that fire is. But I think ultimately, like Ben Johnson's going to do what he feels is best for this team. And Yeah, and that's what you want for your rookie head coach. Ben Johnson should choose on his staff from top to bottom. I don't want the Bears trying to convince him to keep anyone. That's why, I mean, hats off to everybody that lost their job and what they were able to do. Even Thomas Brown and what he was able to come in here and do as well. But I think when it comes down to it, Ben Johnson needs to choose his own staff. That's what he needs to do. That's what we should all want for him. We don't want George McCaskey or anybody else pushing anybody on Ben Johnson. You trusted Ben Johnson coming here and to set a tone and to set a new standard for the Chicago Bears. You need to trust him to do that. Now, in talking about Dennis Allen potentially being a guy that the Bears look at for defensive coordinator, they've already put in a request to interview Aubrey Pleasant for defensive coordinator. Now, this would be another guy that brings a lot of success. Aubrey Pleasant right now, he's the Ram assistant head coach and passing game coordinator, but don't let that passing game coordinator title scare you away from him being defensive coordinator. He's one of the rare coordinators that have had multiple jobs on both sides of the ball. He's done offensive roles, he's done defensive roles, and I think that could be something as far as the versatility that Ben Johnson could want to his staff as well. The Bears are trying to do something different, and I like the fact that they're thinking about bringing in a guy who has held and that assistant head coach with the Rams under McVay. Hey, that's something I'm not necessarily mad at, right? You look at the experience that he has. He's worked in the NFL. He was the Rams cornerbacks coach from 2017 to 2020, right? He worked with Jalen Ramsey, Marcus Peters, those type of guys. In 2021, he was the Lions, where he worked with Ben Johnson before, and he was their defensive backs and passing game coordinator until he was let go about midway through the 2022 season. He then went to the Packers. Yeah, I know how we're going to feel about ops. He then went to the Packers, but then he went back to the Rams in 2023 and became their defensive backs coach and passing game coordinator. And then he was elevated to assistant head coach in 2024. So Aubrey Pleasant is somebody that keep an eye out for. If the Bears were to go him instead of Dennis Allen, of course, I think Dennis Allen brings more kind of a proven commodity, but Aubrey Pleasant is a guy that's done the job. He's held, like I said, multiple positions and can be a very versatile look on Ben Johnson's coaching staff. So we'll see what happens there. Is a name that I didn't expect to hear. I know it was a little bit unexpected for me to hear Aubrey Pleasant's name. I didn't think that that's where we're going to go, but, not mad at it. Shout out to my dad being in the building. Shout out, Pops. Hey, Pops, glad to have you. Always love when my dad's able to come in the building. Shout out to my Pops. Wouldn't be a Bears fan or a Bulls fan if it wasn't for him. So that's what it comes down to. So Ben Johnson's getting to work already with his staff. I had said before that I wouldn't be surprised if we start if he has most his staff in place by the end of the week. I'm going to kind of come off that now. I think with them putting in interview requests, things like that, Ben Johnson just having his press conference yesterday, I actually wouldn't be surprised if this gets pushed more towards next week, as we get some interviews over the course of the weekend. But we'll see what Ben Johnson holds for that, man. I think ultimately when it comes down to it, Ben Johnson's going to find the guys that he needs here. And that's what we need. That's what we should want for the Chicago Bears, man. So, Evie, 100% down to the studs. And you can't really rip something down to the studs if you keep a lot of what's around. Like I said, Hightower staying on as the special teams coordinator, I'm not mad at that at all. I have no qualms with that. But I think when you look at continue building this thing out, you want Ben Johnson's fingerprint to be on every aspect of this football team. If that's going to be your head coach, that's what you want. Not if he's going to be your head coach, that's what you want. And the more that we hear from Ben Johnson as well, I don't know about y'all, it just fills me with better and better feelings when it comes down to it. Hearing Caleb Williams talk about his first conversation with Ben Johnson and kind of this, again, setting the standard, right? Caleb saying this, he's a no-nonsense guy. He'll always have my back. He'll always give me support. So that was one of the biggest things, that and the structure. Holding me accountable and us two being on the same wavelength, him being the head coach, me being the quarterback, me being accountable, being on the right time, on the right page, doing everything right. Then from there, being able to hold everyone accountable for my position. When you get to be on the same wavelength with your head coach, the competitive fire we have towards each other, the discipline we have towards each other, the accountability we have towards each other. I tell you what, like I said, I'm going to wait to get super hyped till we're on the football field. I just have gotten too excited about Bears moves over the last couple of years that really didn't amount to very much. But I tell you what, though, I am super excited about just having a head coach that has already talked about wanting to build this system around Caleb Williams. And I think if most of us are being honest, and that's not to say that Caleb doesn't have his faults. He absolutely has his faults. But I think we'd be remiss to say that it didn't feel at times like Shane Waldron was trying to fit Cole Kmet, Caleb Williams into a system rather than really building it around his strengths. The first time it felt like we had a system kind of built around Caleb's strengths and to limit his weaknesses was when Thomas Brown took over as offensive coordinator. Now that changed 2 weeks later when he got turned into the interim head coach over being the offensive coordinator. But that was really the only time, at least for me, that it really felt like the system was built around Caleb. Ben Johnson's going to do that from day one. He's going to build the system around the strengths of the players, and he's going to put the ball in the hands of his playmakers. Those are simple things that we asked of Shane Waldron, that we asked later in the season where the season started to go left, that we just didn't get. So that's what we want, and we hope that that's going to continue to develop for this team. And listen, I'm excited, and that just is what it is. I'm very excited about what this is what this could potentially be. But I'm not going to allow it to kind of overtake me like I've done the last couple of years until we really get on the football field. Another thing that Ben Johnson spoke about that really kind of opened my eyes, because keep in mind, I get it. He's an amazing offensive mind. He's a creative offensive mind. Some would even call him a revolutionary offensive mind. But his job is the head coach, which means that he needs to have at least some oversight on every facet of this football team: offense, defense, special teams, right? It all comes down to him, and whoever he picks as his coordinators need to be in line with what his vision is. One of the things that Ben Johnson talked about that I loved hearing from him is he said that one of the things that he felt like was a major issue with the Chicago Bears defense was losing Andrew Billings. And he even talked about what it was like coming up and competing against Andrew Billings and how the Bears defense looked different after he went down. And I know it's easy to say that, but when you look at the numbers, it's true, right? And I think also because you want your head coach to at least have a pulse on every facet of your team. Ben Johnson already understanding why the Chicago Bears defense started going a little left. I don't know about y'all, but that's something that I love to hear, right? Because I love to hear that my head coach at least is seeing, hey, this is one of the things with this defense that caused it to start sliding. We need to correct that slide. We're going to need Andrew Billings back healthy, and we're going to need an anchor on that defensive line. And as Ben Johnson talks with Ryan Poles and they make a decision on kind of the players that they want to go after, what they need for the team, having Ben Johnson already kind of have that mindset on, hey, the defensive line, we're missing this. We need to figure out not only is Billings coming back, is he going to be healthy, but how can we avoid that if somebody does go down? Again, the last thing you want is to have a cog go down and it completely stagnate your team, right? Yes, it's going to hurt. You're going to need next men up. You're going to be missing people. But I think if Ben Johnson has identified or feels like he's identified the importance of Andrew Billings to this defensive line and this defense overall, because keep in mind, your pass rush and your pass coverage have a synergistic relationship. If your pass rush is not on point, your pass coverage is going to have a tougher job to do, and vice versa. And so already having Ben Johnson kind of look at that and talk about that a little bit, I think that's a really good point, a really good thing to already be hearing from Ben Johnson as well. Big Fred, what up, Hayes? I'm just looking forward to Ben Johnson putting this coaching staff together and getting this team in the right direction. Completely agree with you, brother. I am looking at what this team can do, right? As far as we and I love that Ben Johnson called us a sleeping giant, right? Because I think that because of, and it's understandable, but because of the slide, the 9-game losing streak, how players kind of lost their momentum, it seemed like the team really lost their edge. I think people started thinking that this team isn't as talented as what it is. Like, make no mistake about it, we still got a lot to prove. It is what it is, right? But this is still a very talented team. And I think the way that things fit together are going to be really important. So I love that Ben Johnson really does believe in a lot of this roster, but he is also going to understand what needs to change. And that brings us to our last topic, right? One of the things that I read coming out of this is that in the interview and in the sit down and meeting with Ben Johnson, Ryan Poles was very open on what he did wrong with Ben Johnson. And we had already heard that was something that Ben Johnson wanted to hear from anybody that he interviewed with. He wanted to hear what the front office's place was in things going left. And reportedly, Ryan Poles was very open and honest with what he did wrong in trying to correct the Chicago Bears team. And so I'm sure that gave Ben Johnson a little bit of solace in that as well, understanding that the guy that he's now tied to in Ryan Poles also sees the problems, sees where he went wrong in the problems, and hopefully can correct them. And Ryan Poles, this whole season, from what's went down on Hard Knocks, getting offered a trade for Velus Jones to end up cutting him for nothing, to signing DeAndre Swift to end up getting nothing for Khalil Herbert, when if you knew that Swift was going to be the new running back one, you should have moved Herbert then, right? This has been a season where all kind of that hype that was around Ryan Poles and all that love that he got, it got ripped away. And now you got to go out there and prove it. And so just like, and I love how it kind of puts everybody in the same path. Ryan Poles got a lot to prove. Ben Johnson has a lot to prove moving on from being an offensive coordinator to a head coach. Caleb Williams, after his rookie year and some of the mistakes that he got made and what Jaden Daniels is doing, has not to say that he needs to look at Jaden Daniels. He has his own things to prove. But Caleb, I talked about it before as Caleb maybe needed this humbling, right? Caleb has been a guy who has been able to get by off talent alone, and that's not what makes a great quarterback in the NFL. So Poles, Ben Johnson, and Caleb Williams all have a lot to prove. And I think when you have that chip on your shoulder, that's Chicago, right? That's the city. But I say even more than that, that puts everybody in the same wavelength. And we talk about alignment. Everybody is in alignment, realizing that they got some shit that they need to prove, not only to themselves, not only to the city, but to the NFL as a large. You want to compete in this league? They got stuff that they need to prove. And I think that that's going to be a big thing, and hopefully correcting this team overall as well, right? So, hey, listen, I love it. I love where we are right now, man. We've also heard that the Bears are all in on fixing the offensive line, which is another good thing to hear as well. And we know what we need to do, man. We know what we need to do. Ben Johnson saying this. I think the offensive line is certainly an area that we need to get better play from going forward. Something that Ryan and I already talked about. We will develop a plan of attack. We will develop a plan of attack for how to get that done. I'm looking forward to getting an excellent offensive line coach into the building to develop the young talent we already have on the roster. And we will certainly talk about acquiring talent to bolster that unit as well. I certainly was blessed the last few years with men that I work with, and that was something I would love to replicate here as well. I mean, it's all laid up there. Dennis Allen went to the Jets today. Oh, shit. Shout out to that. But hey, so listen, all great, all in alignment, man. And I hope that this just continue, man. I hope that this is the unit. I hope that this is the core now that makes the Chicago Bears be what we want this team and this franchise to be. That's all I can hope for, right? I get it. We got a lot of things that we need to do, that we need to fix, that we need to develop. But I hope that this is it. Crimson says, I'm always excited. I love me some Bears football. I feel that. Torian, maybe Tyler Scott develops into a serviceable weapon. Something to look at for there. Something to look at for. I'm not getting too stoked because Flus and Nagy had good intro pressers, but they got hired and everyone was swinging on the nuts. I'll wait and see. Not the same. But I feel that. Let me be clear. I completely understand where you're coming from, but this isn't like Nagy, and this definitely isn't like Flus. There's always going to be excitement around a new head coach. I want to be clear here. There's always going to be excitement, but Matt Eberflus, as a first-time head coach, was making $6.5 million. Ben Johnson's reportedly making 13, double that. Because this team understands that they need to put a serious investment in getting this shit done, right? So let's hope. We got to address that O-line. We got to get it together. And let's hope that we can start doing that. And we got a lot of things that we need to get on the same page. And we'll see what happens. Last question before we get out of here. Do you believe this helps Keenan's chances of returning? I'll say, I've been asked this multiple times, and I'll say no. I don't think that it helps or hurts it. And the only reason I say that because I think Keenan Allen returning just comes down to what he's willing to accept for as far as the contract. The Bears are not in a position to give him the type of money that it was reported he wanted before we traded for him. Now, if he's come down off that, if he's excited about Ben Johnson coming here, if he realizes, hey, let me even take a 1-year deal or whatever to maybe up my value after being on the Bears and a struggling team. But yeah, I don't know if it helps, but I don't think it hurts it either. I think it really comes down to what Keenan Allen is willing to accept and what the Bears are willing to offer to get Keenan Allen to stay here. But again, as a third wide receiver, Rome's shown tremendous growth. I think that Ben Johnson is going to be able to use DJ Moore a lot better than what the last two offensive coordinators have. So we'll see. I think we got so many other things to address. And if we plan on signing any veteran offensive linemen, keep in mind those can be really expensive, veteran O linemen. So that could lead us into where you're getting something else. So we'll see. We'll see. But all right, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. Shout out to Big Kev for holding it down. We lost power today. There's actually a semi truck that took out several power lines and crashed a bunch of cars in a parking lot before hitting an apartment building coming into my complex. So that's why I've been MIA. I have not had any power. I have not had internet. I've been sitting here all day since 9:30 a.m. with nothing. So Big Kev held it down with delivering the daily today. But since I had time before I had to get the kids for school, I still wanted to go forth with the plan daily. So that's why I'm here. But appreciate that. Make sure you guys are following us at Shy Bear Central. You can send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns. ChicagoBearCentral@gmail.com. Lastly, if you want to leave a text message and our voicemail for the mailbag, the number to do so, 773-242-9336. We are the #1 spot for everything Chicago Bears related. And I'll see you guys on the next one. Chi-Town up, Bear down, y'all. Peace.